Hello everyone, it's me, Mr. Alexis R. Osorio, and welcome to Mathematics class. For today's learning objective, we have the learner determines the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of an if-then statements. Okay, so to start our lesson today, let us have a short activity or game entitled Inbox Outbox. For this game, the direction is, given the if-then statement in the inbox, identify the hypothesis and conclusion as your outbox. First inbox. If the sum of two angles is 90 degrees, then they are complementary angles. So what do you think is the hypothesis and conclusion? Okay, the hypothesis here is the sum of two angles is 90 degrees. The conclusion, they are complementary angles. Inbox number 2. If the lines are perpendicular, then they are intersecting. From this inbox, the outbox will be hypothesis. The lines are perpendicular. Conclusion, they are intersecting. Okay, so let us take a look at this number 2. If the lines are perpendicular, then they are intersecting. Let us represent this conditional statement in the following letters. P is the hypothesis. Q is the conclusion. So with that, we can say if P, then Q. Kung saan yung P is the hypothesis at yung Q ay conclusion. In symbols, we can write this as P implies Q. Or P, tapos yung may arrow, papunta sa Q. It is nice that you still remember on how to identify the hypothesis and conclusion of a conditional statement. Today, we are going to learn about converse, inverse, and contrapositive of an if-then statements. To start with, let us have the definition of this word, which is negation. The negation of a statement says the opposite of the original statement. This has something to do with our lesson today. Later on, we will have the purpose why we are having negation. Let us negate the following statements. To negate means to oppose the statement. Let us say, for instance, we have a number 1, the sky is blue. How are we going to oppose this sentence? So ito ay yung kung paano natin kokontrahin yung sentence. So this will be, the sky is not blue. So nagdagdag tayo ng salitang not para masabi natin na ang sky is not blue. With the word not, na-oppose natin or na-negate natin yung sentence. Next, number 2. Pedro passed in the exam. Paano naman natin ito ine-negate or i-oppose? The answer here is, Pedro failed in the exam. So dito pwedeng ang maging sagot natin, Pedro did not pass in the exam. Okay, so because of the word passed. So pag inoppose natin yung pass, that will be fail. Pwede rin naman did not pass. So any of the two can be the answer there as long as you are negating or opposing the sentence. Let us consider these pictures. In the first picture, we have Raleigh, October 2020. Yolanda, November 2013. And Odette, December 2021. What are these? Alright, that is correct. So ito yung mga strong typhoons or ilan lang ito sa mga strong typhoons na naranasan natin sa ating bansa. Let us talk about typhoon in the Philippines. The strongest typhoon to make landfall in the country during this time period was a Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda in November 2013 and Typhoon Goni or Rolly in late October 2020, which both made landfall with 1 minute sustained winds of 315 kilometers per hour or 195 miles per hour. The typhoon also, as of this date, is the deadliest Philippine typhoon during this period, which killed 6,300 people. Okay, from the typhoon in the Philippines, can you make a conditional statement out of it? Okay, example of conditional statement na pwede nating magawa mula doon sa ating story na typhoon in the Philippines, we can say that if the typhoon will enter the Philippine area of responsibility, then there will be strong winds and flooding. Okay, so this is an example of conditional statement based on that story. Now, let us consider this statement number 1. If there will be strong winds and flooding, then the typhoon will enter the Philippine area of responsibility. Let us compare the conditional statement and statement 1. What happened between the hypothesis and conclusion in statement 1? Yes, you are right. The hypothesis and conclusion was interchanged. Kung mapapansin natin, nagkabaliktad talaga si hypothesis at conclusion sa statement 1. Kung ang hypothesis at conclusion ay magkakapalit, ito ay ating tatawaging converse of conditional statement. So we are now going to define converse of conditional statement. The converse of a conditional is formed by interchanging the hypothesis and conclusion. So, ibig sabihin yan, kapag ka ang hypothesis at conclusion ng ating conditional statement ay pinagpalit, ang tawag na dito is converse. Ang ating magiging statement dito, if Q, then P. Mauuna na si Q, then P. In symbols, Q implies P. Okay, let us go back with our conditional statement regarding the typhoon in the Philippines. Ito yun. If the typhoon will enter the Philippine area of responsibility, then there will be strong winds and flooding. Let us have statement number 2. Kasi kanina statement number 1. Sa statement number 1, nakuha natin yung ating converse of conditional statement. So let us find out another based on our statement number 2. If the typhoon will not enter the Philippine area of responsibility, then there will be no strong winds and flooding. What have you observed with the hypothesis and conclusion in our statement number 2? So ano yung mapapansin nyo sa statement number 2? Ano ang nangyari kay hypothesis at conclusion? Ayun. Kung mapapansin natin, sa hypothesis, the typhoon will enter the Philippine area of responsibility. Dito sa statement number 2 natin, naging the typhoon will not enter the Philippine area of responsibility. Nadagdagan tayo ng word na not. Ibig sabihin yan, we just negated the hypothesis. So, ninegate natin yung hypothesis. Dito naman sa conclusion, doon sa ating original conditional statement, there will be strong winds and flooding. Pero dito sa statement number 2, there will be no strong winds and flooding. Nagdagdag tayo ng salitang no. Ibig sabihin yan, nag-negate ulit tayo. Dito, ninegate natin yung conclusion. So, ibig sabihin yan, ang hypothesis at conclusion ay kinuha natin ang negation. The hypothesis and conclusion was negated. Ang tawag natin dito kapag ang hypothesis at conclusion ay kinuha natin ang negation, ito ay inverse of conditional statement. The inverse of a conditional is formed by negating both hypothesis and the conclusion. Ayun, kapag pala nag-negate tayo ng hypothesis at conclusion, inverse ang tawag doon. So don't forget the term inverse because this is very important. So pwede nating sabihin na if not P, then not Q. Naglagay tayo ng word na not kasi nag-negate tayo. So ang salitang not kasi is one way on how we negate or oppose the sentence. In symbols, we can write not P implies not Q. Okay, so balik ulit tayo sa ating original conditional statement. If the typhoon will enter the Philippine area of responsibility, then there will be strong winds and flooding. This time, we are now going to compare the original statement or the conditional statement with our statement number 3. Pangatlo na tayo. Kasi yung una is converse, pangalawa, inverse, and let us find out this statement number 3. If there will be no strong winds and flooding, then the typhoon will not enter the Philippine area of responsibility. Let us now compare the conditional statement and statement number 3. What do you think happened to the hypothesis and conclusion in statement number 3? Alright, you are correct. The hypothesis and conclusion was interchanged and negated. Kung mapapansin natin, from the conditional statement, pinagpalit ang hypothesis at conclusion. Bukod doon, ninegate pa natin. So kapag ka nag-interchange at na-negate ang hypothesis at conclusion, ito naman ay ating tinatawag na contrapositive of conditional statement. The contrapositive of a conditional is formed by interchanging the hypothesis and conclusion and negating both. So ayun. So just remember the definition of contrapositive and let's consider this statement. If not Q, then not P. So ito na ang ating contrapositive. So in symbols, not Q implies not P. Okay, so those are the 3 important words for today. We have the converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So for us not to forget these words, let us summarize them. So una, meron tayong if-then statement or what we call as conditional statement. We also have converse, inverse, and contrapositive. So these are the important words for today. So pasimplihan natin to kung paano natin mas mabilis na matatandaan ang bawat isang salita dito. Sa if-then statement or the conditional statement, if P, then Q. Ulitin ko lang na ang letter P is the hypothesis and Q is the conclusion. So ito yung parang magiging pattern natin para hindi natin makalimutan ang if-then statement. Sa converse naman, ito ay magiging if Q, then P. Ibig sabihin nun, pinagpalit natin ang hypothesis at conclusion. Yung conclusion na Q ay nasa unahan na. Yun namang hypothesis na nasa unahan, nilagay natin sa may bandang dulo. Okay, next. Inverse. Inverse, we have if not P, then not Q. Yung word na not is negation. Nag-negate kasi tayo ng hypothesis, nag-negate tayo ng conclusion. Dito naman sa contrapositive, if not Q, then not P. So just remember this pattern and you will not find it difficult in writing the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of conditional statement. Now, let's practice. State the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of the following conditional statements. Okay, so tignan natin kung kaya nating mag-state ng converse, inverse, and contrapositive sa mga sumusunod na conditional statement. Let's have example number 1. Our conditional statement is, if you live in San Pedro City, then you live in Laguna. Okay, so bago natin kunin ng converse, inverse, and contrapositive, can you identify the hypothesis? Very good. Okay, hypothesis dito ay you live in San Pedro City. Ano naman kaya ang conclusion? What is the conclusion in this conditional statement? All right, that is correct also. You live in Laguna. Okay, so dahil hindi naman mahirap sa atin kung paano i-identify ang hypothesis at conclusion, let us now proceed and state the converse of this conditional. So ito yung ating kailangan tandaan kapag converse, if Q, then P. So what do you think is the converse? All right, that is correct. If your answer is, if you live in Laguna, then you live in San Pedro City. So, ganun lang kabilis. Pinagbaliktad lang natin yung hypothesis at conclusion. Yung San Pedro City na kanina ay nasa unahan, nasa dulo na ngayon. Okay, so aside from converse, let us get the inverse. Okay, so this is now the inverse. So the pattern is, if not P, then not Q. So from our conditional statement, paano kaya natin to gagawing inverse? Alright, I will give you 30 seconds to think. 30 seconds starts now. Okay, time's up. So sa pagkuha ng inverse, kailangan nating i-negate ang hypothesis at conclusion. So tignan natin. If your answer is, if you do not live in San Pedro City, then you do not live in Laguna. So ayun. So pinakita dito kung paano tayo nag-negate ng hypothesis at conclusion. Ang idinagdag natin dito, do not. Kasi kapag ka sinabing live, do not live ang kanyang negation. Next, contrapositive. So, tignan natin yung contrapositive. Ang pattern natin dito, if not Q, then not P. Okay, I will also give you 30 seconds for this. 30 seconds starts now. Time's up. And the correct answer here is, if you do not live in Laguna, then you do not live in San Pedro City. Okay, so I hope that it is clear to everyone on how we state the converse, inverse, and contrapositive of conditional statements. Okay, so just remember the pattern because that is very easy and simple. If you find it difficult to find or to state the converse, inverse, and contrapositive, pwede nyong balikan sa video na ito at i-post nyo kung saan kayo medyo nalilito. Okay, so by the way, I used the book Grade 8 Mathematics Patterns and Practicalities under Gladys C. Nivera, PhD, for the reference of this video. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you learned something. And if you have something to say, comment, or message about the video, just let me know in the comment section. Thank you and see you on my next video. Goodbye!